killed the market for, of course. So now this had killed the market for, of course.
I'm ready.
Well, yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, watching me here on Black Hot Fire Network. My name is INNOSSETU, together with my colleague Africa Maria. She's going to join me anytime soon. Yeah, I'm sorry, we are sorry, and we apologize for yesterday. We weren't able to come. We actually we were supposed to discuss this topic yesterday. Unfortunately, yesterday we weren't able to come here live because of too much rains. Yeah, it has just stopped raining. It has been raining, and electricity since yesterday it has been off, and it has just come back. We apologize for that, and we really apologize for that. Yeah, if you're watching me on YouTube, you're welcome to this show. And of course, if you're watching me for the first time, remember to subscribe. So, like I said, whenever you subscribe in, there is that added advantage for you. Whenever we come in for shows here, you're notified about our shows here. Yeah, but we apologize for yesterday. So if you subscribe, if you subscribe on our YouTube channel, you're watching me on YouTube, please and please and please, whenever we come in, you're notified on your phone or on your computer, on your laptop, desktop stuff, wherever you actually watching me from. For those that are watching me from Twitter, I'm happy to see you, and I hope you're going to enjoy this show. Yeah, today our point of concern is going to be about the monkeypox or the Mpox emergency in Africa. Yeah, this thing is of serious concern. Yeah, we shouldn't take it for granted. People have been got infected with this infectious disease. Uh, a few of them have been recorded dead. For here in Africa, actually, like too much of this disease, it started with Congo. But we see the World Health Organization declared Mpox uh, outbreak in Congo and elsewhere in Africa as a global emergency. actually on Wednesday this week. So cases have been confirmed among children and adults in more than a dozen countries, and the new form of virus is spreading at a high speed. So few vaccine does, of course, are available on the continent. For now, there are few, of course, Mpox vaccines that are available on the continent. So earlier this week, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced that Mpox outbreaks were a public health emergency with more than 500 deaths. So if something at the very beginning has claimed over 500 deaths on the continent of Africa, and of course called international help to stop the virus spread. So this is something that should of course concern us all. The potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying. Of course, the Africa CDC of course previously said pox, also known as the monkeypox, has been detected in 13 countries this year, and more than 96% of all cases and deaths are within Congo. So cases are up to 160% and deaths are to about 19% compared with the same period last year. So far, there have been more than, of course, 14,000 cases, and of course, 524 people have died out of this. So we see that we are now in the situation where, of course, Mpox poses a risk to many more neighbors in, of course, in Africa, uh, the countries that are neighboring Congo, and those other 13 countries that are within Africa. Africa has over 54 countries, so it is very easy for this disease to spread to other countries in Africa. So in 2022, of course, who declared Mpox to be a global emergency after it spread to more than 70 countries that had not previously reported Mpox, mostly affecting gay and bisexual men. This should be a point of concern. It was affecting gay and bisexual men. When you talk about gay men, these are people that have sex with that have love affairs and sex with their fellow men. Bisexual men, these are men that have sex between them and women. Those are bisexuals. Those are bisexuals. So it has been recorded among actually among that category of people. So um of course, in the outbreak, fewer than 1% of the people died at the beginning. We see that of course, declaring these latest Mpox outbreaks in Africa, of course, an emergency is warranted if that might lead to more support to, of course, to contain them. It's a failure of a global community that, of course, things had to get this bad to release the resources needed. So officials at the Africa CDC said nearly 70% of the cases in Congo are in children younger than 15 years. So who also accused for 85% of the deaths, accounted of the 85% of the deaths. So we see that experts were particularly worried about the spread of Mpox in camps for refugees in the country's conflict-ridden east in Congo. So the worst case have been is that the 6-week-old baby who was just 2 weeks old, who is of course contracted with Mpox. So the kid got infected because of the hospital overcrowding meant he and his mother were forced to share a room with someone else who had the virus, which was, of course, undiagnosed. So Save the Children, of course, let's save the children from this. However, we see that the new form of infection is harder to spot. This, of course, this Mpox, of course, a disease. So earlier this year, we see that scientists reported the emergence of a new deadlier form of Mpox, which can kill up to 10% of the people in the Congolese mining town that they feared might spread more easily to other areas. So Mpox mostly, of course, spreads via close contact with the infected person, including through sex. Unlike the previous Mpox outbreaks, where of course lesions were mostly seen on the chest, hands, and feet, the new form of causes milder symptoms and lesions on the genitals that makes it harder to spot, meaning people might also sicken others without knowing they are infected. So before, of course, 2022 outbreak, the disease had mostly of being seen, of course, in sporadic outbreaks in the Central and West Africa. When people came into close contact with the infected wild animals like monkeys. So Western countries during the 2022 outbreak mostly shut down the spread of mpox with the help of vaccines and treatments, but very few of these have been available in Africa. So, in the absence of mpox vaccines licensed in the West, officials could consider, of course, inoculating people against the smallpox related disease as per now in Africa. So, so far, the country that is at risk here, of course, in Africa, the major country that is at risk is, of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo for now. It is the country that is taken to be at a high risk for now, the Democratic Republic of Congo. But we see the rapid spread of mpox, formerly called of course, the monkeypox in African countries, constitutes the global health emergency, and the World Health Organization declared it on Wednesday, like I said earlier. This is the second time in 3 years that the World Health Organization, has designated an mpox epidemic as a global emergency. It previously did so in July 2022. The outbreak went on to affect nearly 100,000 people, primarily gay and bisexual men, in the 116 countries, and killed over 224 people. So the threat this time is deadlier. Since the beginning of this year, the Democratic Republic of Congo alone has reported over 15,000, of course, mpox cases, and 50, and of course 537 deaths. That is Congo only. So the most risk include women and children under 15. So the detection and rapid spread of the new cloud of mpox in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. It's a detention in neighboring countries that had not of course, previously reported mpox. And of course, the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying, as it is said by, of course, by experts. So the outbreak spread through 13 countries in Africa, including a few that had been reported mpox cases before. So the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention declared a public health emergency of the African continental security. So the first time the organization has taken the step since the African Union granted it the power to do so last year. It is in the interests of the countries of the African continent and of the world to get our arms around this and stop the transmission as soon as we can. Those were the words of the executive director of the preparedness and response at the coalition epidemic. So we see that facing the threat of global spread, the Centers for the Disease Control and Prevention has argued clinicians and, of course, the public in the United States to be alert of the virus. So who designated the public health emergency of international concerns is intended to prompt number of countries to begin preparing for the virus appearances and share vaccine treatments and other key resources for poorer nations. So The outbreak, of course, last year stayed mostly within tight sexual networks among gay and, of course, bisexual men, like I said. A combination of behavioral changes and vaccination, of course, tampered down the spread. In the United States, for example, the toll dropped to about 1,700 cases last year to, of course, 30,000 cases. So the version of Mpox that has been circulating in Congo has always been more virulent and currently, of course, a death rate of about 3% compared to the 0.2% in the 2022 outbreak. So the infection can produce fever, respiratory symptom, muscle aches, and swollen lymph nodes, as well as the rash on the hands, feet, chest, mouth, and this time around the genitals. So um, until recently, it is spread mainly through consumption of contaminated meat or close contact with infected animals and people. So most of the deaths have been in children who are in this region of Africa, that is Congo, are already beset by malnutrition and infectious diseases like cholera, measles, and polio. So should the outbreak spread globally, children in developed countries are likely to be less vulnerable to severe illness, experts said so. Last year only, for the first time, scientists discovered sexual transmission of the version of of Mpox, with the cases split, of course, about equally among young men and women. So, according to the genetic analysis, sometime around September, the virus gained a mutation that enabled it to spread more readily among people. It has done so particularly through heterosexual prostitution. This, of course, viral type has not suffered outside Africa. However, um, overall, there have been more than 17,000, of course, presumed and confirmed mpox cases in 13 countries, according to Africa CDC. So most of the cases of deaths have occurred in Congo. Given the rapid spread, the declaration of the global health emergency was justified. So, amid rising numbers, Congo has, of course, approved the two Mpox vaccines, and the Japanese products called the LOC16 and, of course, the Genos. So the vaccine made by, of course, the Bavarian Nordic that was used in 2022 in the United States and Europe, but Congo has yet to institute an immunization plan. So on August 9, the World Health Organization invited vaccine manufacturers to apply for an emergency use listing. Of course, a prescribed for international groups such as the Gavi, a global vaccine alliance, to purchase and distribute the shots in low-income economies. So, the challenge is that these vaccines are not sufficient. Even if countries try to protect only the people at the highest risk, they'll so this disease is so serious, and of course, when it comes to Congo, I don't know why this Eastern Democratic Republic is so much cast. I'm sorry to say this. This is serious. I'm not joking about this, but everything is happening in the of course in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the everything is happening in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Most of the rebels in the area. Now we see diseases come out, they come out in the mining area. So I don't know why it is so. I don't know why it is so, like it happens like that. Like whenever we see something, it happens in the Eastern Democratic in those areas. But a lot of people have been saying that it is much play. It is too much into, of course, bisexual and of course gay men. But ah, okay, okay, guys, allow me share this video with you to uh, to this. Uh, Allow me share this, guys, to you so that you can so that you can feel what I'm talking about. So that you 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 can feel
The
what I'm
continent
talking
of
about.
Africa is on the brink of a public health emergency. At least 12 countries have been affected by the latest outbreak of Mpox. The African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the Africa CDC, is likely to declare a continent-wide public health emergency over the growing Mpox outbreak. The CDC says because of increase in Mpox cases and its continued spread across borders, it has resolved to start active engagement with African Union member states to prevent the outbreak from becoming another pandemic. A total of 887 new confirmed and suspected cases of Mpox have been reported in Africa in 1 week, pushing this year's total to over 15,000. The cases have increased 160% compared with the same time period last year. The CDC announcement came a day after the World Health Organization said it would convene an emergency committee meeting to determine whether the Mpox spread in Africa should be declared a global emergency.
In light of the spread of Mpox outside DRC and the potential for further international spread within and outside Africa, I have decided to convene an emergency committee under the international health regulations to advise me on whether the outbreak represents a public health emergency of international concern. The committee will meet as soon as possible and will be made up of independent experts from a range of relevant disciplines from around the world.
Let's break down what we know about Mpox and the current outbreak so far. Now, first things first, what is Mpox? It is an infectious disease caused by a virus. The symptoms include fever, chills, and muscle aches, and are typically followed by a rash that starts as raised spots, which turn into blisters filled with fluid, and these eventually form scabs. There are broadly two different types known as clades. Now, clade 1 was once known as the Congo Basin clade. Now, the clade 2 as the West African clade, and both can be fatal, but clade 1 has had a higher death rate. Now, the Africa CDC says 34 countries in Africa are either reporting infections or are considered at high risk. At least 12 countries have reported cases so far, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has more than 90% of the cases. Some countries like Burundi, Kenya, and Rwanda have reported Mpox cases for the first time. Like I mentioned, the most severe outbreak is in the DRC, which has over 90% of the cases in Africa. 511 Mpox deaths have been reported this year. Cases of a deadlier strain of Mpox have been confirmed in 4 countries. A new offshoot of the clade 1, called clade 1b, has been detected in East DRC. It has also been confirmed in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda.
Fatality ratio overall in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is around 3.6%, higher in endemic areas, and especially in infants and young children, and lower in the eastern part of the country at the moment, where spread is more rapid through sexual transmission.
Earlier, clade 1 typically spread by people eating infected bushmeat, but clade 1b is spreading person to person, often via sexual contact. It is also spreading through other physical and face-to-face contact or via contaminated bedding or towels.
live in an interconnected world, and these pathogens do not respect borders. So I just want to get across the urgency that we're trying to say that the action is now, the time is now for us to take much more measures and provide much more support to the African region, to the countries that are affected across the entire spectrum, from surveillance to prevention to risk communication to clinical care to infection prevention control to R&D to the use of vaccines. It's now.
There are vaccines, but there are issues with access. Africa CDC says it needs 10 million doses, but only 200,000 are available. Authorities say a lack of treatments and diagnostics is hampering the response. Plans for vaccination programs are still under review, but other plans, including tracing and vaccinating contacts of cases, could be launched.
There are 2 vaccines for Mpox that have been approved by WHO-listed national regulatory authorities and which are recommended by WHO Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization, or SAGE. I have triggered the process for emergency use listing of both vaccines, which will accelerate vaccine access, particularly for lower-income countries, which have not yet issued their own national regulatory approval. Emergency use listing also enables partners, including Gavi and UNICEF, to procure vaccines for distribution.
Now, for more on this, we have with us Dr. Sultani Matendechero, the Deputy Director General at the Ministry of Health, Kenya. Welcome to First Post.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Right. Now, like I mentioned, Africa is on the brink of a public health emergency due to the rapidly increasing Mpox cases. How alarming is the current outbreak?
Yeah, so I would just like to confirm that yes, we have been able to record some Mpox virus infections, and specifically because in Kenya, where I can be able to speak for, we have been able to confirm 1 case, and we are aware that there are also a few other cases in other areas. However, whether this constitutes a public health emergency of international concern, that is not yet declared. So we can only wait until the full process is undertaken, because there is a procedure that has to be followed before any kind of public health issue like this one can now be declared a public health emergency of international concern. But what we can say as at now is that there are some cases. Yeah.
Right. And what are the measures that could be taken to interrupt the transmission of the virus in the affected countries?
So the quick and behavioral measures that we are currently encouraging are trying to avoid contact, because this is a virus that is transmitted through contact. So if we avoid contact with especially with the infected persons who are already displaying signs and symptoms, then it contributes to a very large extent to being able to stop the transmission of the virus. Secondly, we are also encouraging that, of course, as part of avoiding contact, those who display the classical signs and symptoms should really, present themselves to the health facilities nearest to them, so that they can self-isolate or they can be isolated from the general public and even managed at the same time. However, it is good to note that Mpox is a viral disease that also has vaccines. To stop the outbreaks and even transmission at large.
Yes. That is very good to know. yes, what steps could people take on an individual level to avoid the spread of infection?
Yeah, COVID-19 was fundamentally different when you look at it in terms of the natural history, even the symptomatology and the cause of disease. We are seeing fundamental differences here because when we talk of Mpox, we are talking of a disease that has a very low case fatality rate. We have variants. So one of the variants actually, which is less virulent, the West African clad, we call them clads. The West African clad, the mortality rate is less than 1%. And when it comes to the other Central African clad, then the Congo Basin clad, the mortality rate is about 5 to 10%. So you'll find that we might not really have the same level of changes that we observed when it came to COVID-19. However, we are still concerned because unlike COVID-19, this is one disease that actually has very extensive cosmetic, effects, and at the same time, it also has quite a bit of stigma related to it, because when we talk of contact, one of the key ways of contact is through sexual contact, and so there's a bit of stigma that is related to it, which many times complicates the interventions that we implement. So it is bound to change the way in which we do things, but not as fundamentally as COVID-19. Now, how do people go about trying to prevent transmission? As I have already said, first of all, we avoid contact with infected people. Number two, we observe hygiene, wash our hands more frequently and, with soap and water. And also, where necessary, we need to, use protective equipment, such as masks, when we are in crowded areas. And even when we are handling things and people, we can also probably consider using other protective equipment like gloves and so on, especially in the clinical areas.
Right. Right. And Doctor, the Democratic Republic of Congo has reported the highest number of cases and a new deadlier variant. Can you share any details on this?
I might not be able to share specific details about the Democratic Republic of Congo because the ministry responsible for public health in the Democratic Republic of Congo would be better placed to give such details. But indeed, we know that some of the cases that have been confirmed have been actually found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I cannot speak with authority around the numbers. We know that most of the cases are of the Central African clad, which I said is a little bit more virulent than the West African clad. And one of the things about this particular, strain is that it has much better efficiency when it comes to human transmission. Remember, Mpox is a zoonotic disease. It can be transmitted from animals to humans and also between humans. So this one has a better efficiency, the one that is predominant in the Congo. But with regard to the details, then I would advise that either we get authorities from the Public Health Ministry to give the details, or the World Health Organization, because this is something that we also report to the World Health Organization.
Yes. Right, and the World Health Organization has convened an expert group to determine if the increasing spread of the Mpox virus in Africa warrants being declared as a global health emergency. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that is one of the responsibilities of the Director General of the World Health Organization. Because when cases are reported of such a public health issue, then, of course, depending on how it spins out, then sometimes it might need to be considered for declaration as a public health emergency of international concern, because this is a virus that is showing tendencies of fitting the bill of a public health emergency of international concern. Number one, it has shown the ability to move from country to country across international borders. Number two, it is also, it is a virus that it is an infection that can easily, can easily overcome some of the public health facilities that we have, so that we really need to be aware in terms of detection and to handle such cases. So the Director General is mandated to convene the emergency committee, which from reports, I think he's considering doing that. And when the emergency committee meets, then they will consider the merits of this infection and determine if it meets the criteria of being declared as a public health emergency of international concern. However, I just want to add that one of the criteria that is very important for declaration of a public health emergency of international concern is that we should be able to see cases in several regions in the world. What we are seeing here is a situation where the cases are confined to the African region, but then these are issues that will be handled by the emergency committee, which will now advise the Director General accordingly.
Right. And what is the situation via the Mpox in Kenya right now? And how is the government there handling it?
So as I had said earlier, we were able to detect one case of a suspected case of Mpox infection at the Kenya-Tanzania border while he was crossing into Tanzania, traveling towards Rwanda. We took samples and we were able to confirm that this is an Mpox case. We immediately went into action. We heightened our surveillance. We instituted contact tracing. We also issued case definitions to our teams, and we also beefed up our health facilities. Now, so far, we have been able to run quite a number of samples, which we have collected from contact tracing and also from suspected cases. So far, we have not gotten any other additional positive case. And we have also been able to constitute what we call an incident management team. We have formed an incident management structure, bringing together all the relevant stakeholders who are supposed to participate in this response. So far, we are confident that if any case comes in, we have screened more than 120,000 people who are coming in through our borders and our points of entry. And we are sure that we are now very well equipped to detect any other case that would come in. And if there is any other case in the country, then we should be able to detect it as fast as possible. And one of the things I'd like to say is that we are also encouraged by the fact that the transmissibility of Mpox is not as bad as we would imagine. And so we are not very worried of a widespread outbreak. We believe that with the measures we've put in place, then we should be able to contain the situation as it is right now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right. Doctor, thank you very much for being with us on First Post. Very glad to have you and your valuable insights. Appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
That is the Mpox, and that is how it is played. But for me, my view of point is going to be, of course, different from other people, and how they are viewing, of course, this Mpox spread. It's going to be different. When we look at Africa, for a long time, very many people actually have tried to impart a lot of diseases on Africa, actually to show that like most of the diseases, they originate here from Africa. Now, there is a way they are naming these. Of course, they say that there are two types of this Mpox. There is the Congo and the West African cloud. So, to me, there is also something that actually something that they are posting in very many articles that this Mpox spread is so much in bisexuals and gay people. So I will not say that there are not gay people within the Democratic Republic of Congo and other West African countries. However, it is claimed that cases in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, actually almost all East African countries, all countries that are neighboring Congo, they have got at least a case of this disease. But for me, I'm looking at this in a different way. However, an emergency, of course, has been created. But for me, my view of the entire situation is so much different. Uh, we've had for a long time diseases that are caused in Africa, where these diseases have been transmitted by non-Africans and they have spread to the entire Africa. Um, they said this Mpox, of course, it had mutations. It had to create a new form of Mpox that can be transmitted through sexual issues. For a long time in Africa, like there is no disease that is going to be created here in Africa. Let it be on an international scale. Let it be COVID-19. Without these people who created this disease knowing um, the cause, first of all, neither having the antidotes for this disease. So most of these diseases, they are created for, of course, pharmaceuticals and of course medicine country, of course, companies to create money. The first thing I see they are talking about much is of course creating or bringing out vaccines for this mpox. This is something that they normally do for whatever that happens here. We had COVID-19 here. The first thing they brought is vaccination. They had to vaccinate almost most of the people in African countries. They vaccinated everyone. So don't be surprised to don't be surprised to hear that like different countries are going on around to vaccinate their people. Don't be surprised. This is where we are going.